Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting of Transportation Policy and Finance of Monday, February 2nd to order. And Representative Anderson, have you had a time to review the minutes?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that the minutes from Monday, February 2nd be approved.
That would be the minutes from
Oh, that's
28th, actually.
I'm sorry, wrong page. The January 28th.
My goodness.
That's not me.
Okay.
But we're working on technical difficulties here,
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Anderson moves the minutes of January 28th. All those in favor, say aye. 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 Opposed? Minutes are approved. Maybe we'll pause just a couple seconds here to see if we can.
It's kind of hard to when it stops.
John.
Sure.
So quiet.
So we have to be talking for you to figure this out?
Yeah.
Agenda.
Okay, well, we will get started here.
We could all help you by pushing our mute buttons when the sound. Would that help?
Transportation Unplugged. That's great. That's a good album.
Yeah, exactly. Better not
The
be.
acoustic.
Thanks a lot.
Super. People love the acoustic version.
Do you have a minute?
I thought it was in here. Members, we believe we've got this under control, and we will be having a Met Council overview today, and we have Chair Dunning with us and Mr. Shetman. I understand, Mr. Chair, that you do have another meeting to get to, so you'd like to have some comments first. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I was worried that maybe the technical difficulties were a bad omen for the council, but hopefully you were able to work through those. Thank you for the opportunity to both be here just briefly today, and I'll be back Wednesday for the entire budget overview, so I want to make sure committee members know that. But it was great just speaking with you just a short bit ago earlier today and meeting you, and I look forward to working with the Transportation Committee. Transportation Committee is a place I spent a large amount of time over the last decade or so, sitting out in the audience and participating in that way, and I've been on a Met Council member for the last 4 years, and I'm really excited to be chair. Among the many reasons why I'm excited to be the next chair of the Met Council is the fact that it's now a full-time job, which means that I'll be a lot more engaged here at the legislature and more broadly in the region. So I just encourage anyone around the table, if you have questions for me or our staff, to never hesitate to reach out directly to me, to Judd, to our other staff that you hear from today, Brian and Arlene McCarthy. And with that, I look forward to being back Wednesday and being involved very much in the conversation during the session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair and members, my name is Judd Shetman. I'm the Government Affairs Director for the Metropolitan Council, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today. This will be the first of 2 days. As our Chair Dunnick just mentioned, we are going to give an overview of the Council's role in regional transportation today, and then on Wednesday we'll be back to talk about the Governor's proposal. So we'll be able to get into more detail for you on Wednesday, but for today's purposes, we just wanted to make sure that the Council or the committee had an opportunity to understand the roles that the Council plays, not only in the operating roles of transportation in the metro area, but also in the planning area. So who we are, we were created in 1967 for the orderly growth of the 7-county metro area. As many of you know, that our board is made up of 17 members, which are all appointed by the governor. The chair serves at large, and the other 16 members serve in districts. And this map shows the 16 districts of the Metropolitan Council area. It is interesting to note that the council has about 4,100 employees. About 3/4 of them are from Metro Transit and in the transportation area. And with me is Brian Lamb, who's our general manager for Metro Transit. We're going to get into that in just a little bit. But as far as the council's role in transportation, there are really two functions. The first is in the transit operations, where we provide, contract for, and coordinate the transit operations for both the bus system and rail system. And then we also provide assistance or financial assistance to local transit providers, and that includes some of our funding sources that we receive from the state, so particularly the motor vehicle sales tax. In planning, the council is designated as the region's metropolitan planning organization, also known as the MPO, where we do the long-range transportation planning and short-term federal funding for the region. Next is our transit operations. Here you just see a few graphics here of the different types of transportation. But for regional transportation services, the council has a number of them. The first being our regular bus system that's provided by Metro Transit. We have two LRT lines, the blue line and the green line, also known as the Hiawatha line and Central Corridor. We've got the Metro Red line, which is the BRT line along Cedar Avenue in Dakota County and up into Hennepin County. We have the North Star commuter rail line. Regional support for ride-share services. We've got Metro Mobility, which is our ADA service that we are required to provide by federal statute. This is our the handicap accessible rides, and we'll go into more detail actually on all of these. We provide contracted regular out, Dial-A-Ride, which is really the service that's provided outside of the transit service area. Then we also have Metro Van Pool. Our partners in regional transit are here today as well. Those are the Suburban Transit Providers, and they're going to give you a presentation a little bit, so I will jump through that. This next slide talks about or shows our regional ridership over
Excuse
the
me,
past.
Mr. Shetman.
Thank
Representative
you.
Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Real quick, contracted bus regular route. It's not, I'm not figuring out what that is.
Mr. Shetman?
Representative Runbeck, Arlene McCarthy, who's sitting behind me, is going to be going into detail on that in just a little bit. So I think unless you want to hear from her right now, or go ahead, Brian.
No, I mean, it's just a term I'm not familiar with.
Mr. Chair, Representative Brian Lamb, Metro Transit General Manager. Contracted regular route services that there are certain, a number of big and small bus regular route services that the council directly contracts with. And in fact, of all the service that the council directly manages, about 25% of it is contracted out to private providers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll wait to hear more.
Okay, thank you.
Great.
Please continue.
Mr. Chair and members, the next slide here is our regional transit ridership. As you can see, for the year 2014, we had 97.5 million rides that were provided. 63% of them were urban local. We've got the express ridership in there at about 9%. Light rail is 16%, and you can see the rest. But it's important to note that our bus system really accounts for 83% of the overall rides. So 83% of the 97.5 million rides were on our bus system. This is a slide that I know the committee asked for actually the first day that you met, and I know there was a presentation with MnDOT, and there was a question about regional transit service performance. So what this shows is the different types of service that is provided here in the regional transit system. Urban local is bus, suburban local is bus, express is bus as well. Then we've got light rail, commuter rail, Metro Mobility, which again is the ADA service, and then the regional dial-a-ride. And as you can see, the subsidy per passenger varies quite a bit, as well as the passenger per hour and the fare recovery. But we get into this in a little bit more detail as we move through the presentation, but we just wanted to make sure that the committee was able to see this comparison. So now we move into Metro Transit, and Mr. Lamb is going to pick it up from here.
Once again, Mr. Chair, members, my name is Brian Lamb, General Manager for Metro Transit. It's a pleasure to be here today. I want to give you a little bit of overview of Metro Transit operations in total. This last year, Metro Transit provided 84.5 million rides, which is actually the highest ridership total that we've achieved in over 30 years. So we're very pleased with that. The goal continues to go up. In 2015, our goal is for 87.5 million rides. Metro Transit accounts for about 90% of overall regional transit ridership. We do that with 3,176 dedicated men and women who are focused on trying to provide reliable daily service for residents throughout the region. We are the 15th largest transit system in the country, and we operate a mix of services, both regular route, big bus service, both with our 40-foot bus services, as well as what we call 60-foot articulated bus services, as well as a combination of light rail operations for both the Blue Line along Hiawatha Corridor, as well as this last summer opening up the Green Line, connecting downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. Who are Metro Transit customers? I think that's a common question, one that we I think are really focused in on trying to make sure that we understand who our customers are so we can provide the right types of service. Actually, we know that from our surveys over a long-term basis that 80% of our customers are people who are just connecting to and from work or to and from school. And 40% of the people who work in downtown Minneapolis get to and from work using transit. And contrary to popular belief, the majority of people who use transit actually have access to cars but choose to use transit. 45% of light rail riders and 25% of bus riders have household incomes above 50%. We just finished another one of our biennial surveys, and once again came back with customers really like us, as Sally Field used to say, and 95% gave us very strong marks in terms of satisfaction with our overall service. And 9 in 10 of our customers are likely to recommend their service to us. to others. One of the reasons why we have been successful, and in fact we have grown in our ridership in 9 of the last 10 years, is that we've developed very strong relationships with and partnerships with the area businesses in the metropolitan area.
Excuse me,
In
Mr.
fact-
Lamb, before we go on to that, Representative Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. So I'm just curious on terminology here, Mr. Lamb. So 84 million rides, does a ride mean it's actually somebody who actually was in the seat when it went? Because I see a lot of these transit vehicles that are largely empty. And if it does mean that somebody's actually in that seat, how many empty rides do we deliver?
Mr. Lamb?
Mr. Chair, Representative, it is fare-paying customers, people who are in the vehicle, that's what we count. We have a way that we count the operators responsible for making sure that everyone who boards a bus is counted, and everyone who takes light rail, for example, is responsible for having proof of payment, and we, over time, validate that proof of payment by onboard fare payment checks by our transit police. Now, to the question of how much available space, we do have capacity, and depending on the time of day, one of the things that makes transit ridership, I think, really a cost-effective alternative is that there is opportunity without increasing costs for actually increasing the overall ridership. So we think that's a real opportunity, and one of the ways that we market ourselves is to introduce ourselves to people who otherwise have not tried transit through a variety of special event and other kinds of services that get people acclimated to using the convenient option of transit.
Representative Drazkowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lamb. So if we were to divide 84.5 million by some decimal to represent the percentage of potential riders that 84.5 million represents to come up with a total number of rides offered, what would that be?
Mr. Chair, Representative, I'm not exactly sure I understand if you're talking about the available capacity after an existing, and that varies quite widely, if you will, depending on the time of day and type of service. And one of the things when Mr. Shetman was pointing out earlier, for instance, there are lots of our routes that when we do run service that actually have standing room only, so we don't have any available spots. Other times of the day, even on that particular route that might have standing room only on at certain times of the day, might have available seats. The other thing about the productivity associated with certain routes is that, for instance, we'll call an urban local route where people get on and off over the course of maybe a 10-mile stretch. We might actually have 75 people get on and off that bus. If they were all on at the same time, there would be no spots. But what happens on an urban local route is that as people get on, other people get off, and we may end up, from a perception standpoint, never filling all the available seats, but from a productivity standpoint, we've actually exceeded what our regional and our Metro Transit goals are for that particular trip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Uglum?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just take a second and go back to one of the slides where you were talking about fare recovery. I believe it was one of the first few slides there. First of all, question, why is there such a wide variation and in some cases as little as 17.9% or 12.9% in terms of fare recovery? Why is that?
Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, what we've tried to do over the course of the last, I think, 25 years especially, is to right-size the appropriate transit service with the market area or the demand for that service. For instance, in the suburban area where you have less density and less concentration of destinations, when you look at the suburban local, you're going to have fewer customers get on. However, Those are the types of services we tend to contract out. We tend to support with small bus service. So the overall operating cost per hour tends to be lower than it does, for instance, in an urban local setting. If you take a look at the urban local productivity for the urban local bus, it's 44.6, which is really high compared, and we'll talk a little bit about how we compare to peer transit systems throughout the country, but relatively speaking, a lot higher than it is for some other types of bus services. On the other hand, one of the ways that we adjust for that is having a fare differential. We try to create, for instance, the demand for transit services is highest during the peak hours, the morning and afternoon rush hour, and so the fare is higher during the rush hours than it is during the off-peak hours. And it's also higher for those services that are inherently less productive because they are point-to-point services. And I mean by that, as an example, express bus service. Most express bus service in the region, you board at a park and ride, and then you might go 7 to 15 miles without stopping. So that captured audience that you have, it represents the total revenue that you're going to collect from passengers for that 15 miles. So their peak express fare is the highest in the region.
Follow-up?
Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to ask, I have been told by people, and I guess I've seen it, on the light rail system, you enter the mode of transit, the light rail, and it's largely an honor system. You have your Metro Transit police that spot check. Do you have any figures on how many people are riding for free? And then a second question is, if your transit police do apprehend somebody, what is the penalty?
Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, I'm glad you asked that.
It's Uglum.
Oh, Uglum, I apologize. I won't make that mistake again.
Thank you.
Representative Uglum, we do have a regular monthly goal in terms of numbers of fares that we will check and percentage of riders that we will check on both the Blue and Green Line, as well as North Star, in a barrier-free system. Our police statistics show that both for for the Green Line and for the Blue Line, on a monthly basis, over 98% of the people have proof of payment that the officers are looking for. And with that proof of payment, that validates that they have indeed paid the fare, and we have just are in the process of completing an internal audit to verify those police numbers, and we've also worked with the University of Minnesota to do an independent assessment of our fare compliance rates, and all of them support that high fare compliance rates. For instance, on North Star, which is also an honor system at the stations, fare compliance is well over 99%.
Last one.
All right, Representative Uglum.
So we have the honor system here in Minneapolis. I travel extensively to Chicago, and of course that's not an honor system. Are there other honor systems around the country for that type of, for light rail?
Mr. Chair, Representative Uglum, yes, there are. And in fact, the current, the newer generations of rail systems tend to be more oriented towards the honor system. And part of that is because of the infrastructure costs that goes along in creating I'll say a barrier pay system, which you would have a turnstile or other sort of a station level kind of proof of payment before you get onto the platform itself. And it's much more costly on the front end to do that. And studies have shown throughout the country it doesn't necessarily lend itself to a higher fare compliance rate either. So I think this region has really made a cost-effective decision to go in the barrier-free direction.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I see that you're getting to this point. I think Representative Drazkowski I think the core of his question was about efficiency, and you're getting to this on page 18, that we have the highest fare box recovery ratio in country and one of the lowest operating expense per passenger mile systems in the country, and I remember that from the other overviews you've done. So I guess I just wanted to make the point that we're doing very well in that category compared to our peer cities, but I see that you're getting to that, so.
Thank you. Representative Lucero, then we'll probably shut down the questions for a while and let you get through your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I have two questions. The first of which I expect you would not necessarily have an answer to immediately, but I would be interested in the answer when time allows. And that is, you made a point, both my questions are related to the 84.5 million rides in 2014. The first being, I'm curious to know, over those 30 years, what has been the growth rate, and then compare that to the growth rate of the general population in that same period of time. Second question is, the 84.5 million trips, does that, there are cases where people will ride a bus, get off, and then take the next bus. Would that count as 2 trips as part of the 84.5 million, or would that be counted as 1?
Mr. Chair, Representative, we will get you the long-term growth of the transit system, as well as comparing that to the regional growth. And so I think in the last decade, you'll see that the growth in the transit system ridership has actually outstripped the rate of growth in the metropolitan region. Not historically the case, but certainly showing the growing momentum of transit ridership. Secondly, related to, now I'm... The transfers. The transfers, in that case, it would count as 2 trips. Anytime someone boards a vehicle, it counts as a unique trip towards that 84.5 million rides.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Please continue.
Mr. Chair, members, I wanted to just finish up this slide, if you will. We recognize in terms of our growth and our business model is really that partnership with both the schools and the business relationships. In the last several years, we've really worked hard towards strengthening our relationship with metro area businesses. We have 288 employers who are MetroPass providers, and we have provides 12 million of that 84 million rides come from MetroPass users. In addition, we have a really strong relationship with the University of Minnesota for regional transit services, and that ridership is continuing to grow. This last year, since the opening of the Green Line, our UPass, our number of people participating in the UPass program has grown about 6.5%, so a very solid growth for a very established program. Our College Pass is modeled after the U.S. UPass program. It's for the other smaller colleges around the metropolitan area. And in the last few years, we've been working first with the Minneapolis School District and now with the St. Paul School District in developing an alternative to the yellow school bus for senior high students, where we use regular route service and provide services supporting 42 high schools. And last year, 3.5 million rides came from high school students. Annually, and I hope that maybe some of you have had a chance to experience, we also provide a great alternative to the Minnesota Great Get-Together by providing services with our counterparts, the Suburban Transit Providers, to the Minnesota State Fair, and last year Metro Transit provided over half a million rides to the State Fair. One of the things that we want to make sure that we do is that we're good environmental stewards, and we really have focused in all parts of our business in terms of reducing our overall energy costs and really ultimately looking at the next generation of propulsion and gas and propulsion throughout the system. So, for instance, you'll see several statistics in terms of our reduction. In fact, Metro Transit has reduced its overall utility costs $3.5 million per year through, I think, some very smart initiatives. Last year, of course, I think the marquee enhancement for the transit system and Metro Transit was the opening of the Green Line, but that isn't the only enhancement that we have. We really are focused on trying to make sure that we expand services throughout the metropolitan area, and we opened up a couple new park and rides. We had new bus service that better connected the residents throughout the central corridor between Minneapolis and St. Paul. We put together a 15-year bus service improvement plan and really went through a very extensive public outreach process in terms of vetting that out. We went through a process and have the A line, our first arterial bus rapid transit line, a project approved, and that will be implemented before the end of the year. What that will do is it has many of the features of a light rail line, a limited stop, high amenity service that will ultimately connect Rosedale on the north end and go down Snelling Avenue and then through Highland and connect at the Blue Line at the 46th Street station. And then we also receive very positive news from the federal government that allows us to move our Orange Line, which is our bus rapid transit line connecting the southern suburbs to downtown Minneapolis along 35W into what they call project development. To Representative Hornstein's earlier point, I want to move into a couple of points about our bus operations and relative effectiveness. I can appreciate that there are many different types of bus service, and we generally break our regular route bus operations into three categories: the regular route local bus, the express bus, and then, as I mentioned, bus rapid transit, which has operations that are similar to light rail. When you look at how this metropolitan area, and particularly Metro Transit, operates in comparison to our peers, every year the National Transit Database puts together information from throughout the country and then allows transit systems to pull that information for its own edification. And you can see that on an operating expense per passenger mile, our bus system is really very cost effective compared to many of our what we call our comparable peers of like-sized transit systems around the country. And in fact, our 84 cents is 26% more cost effective than the peer average in operating expense per mile. To Representative Hornstein's point, the passenger fare recovery, in other words, of the total cost, when we allocate the total cost to bus and to rail and and then look at what percentage of that total cost is covered from the fare box revenue from our passengers, you'll see that Metro Transit overall on the bus system is well in excess of 32, I think it's 33% fare recovery in the last year that we have the available data, 2012, and you can see that's the highest of the peers that we compare it to. From a light rail transit perspective, as you look at light rail, one of the things that we are we look at light rail, one of the things that we note and are trying to build is a system, and the more that we can create those connection points, the more cost-effective overall light rail will be. And you can see even for an emerging transit system, this represents 2012, so it was before the Green Line became operational. The Metro Transit operating cost per mile is on the lower end of our peers, and when you look at its fare box, it definitely is competitive with the peers throughout the country. I want to just highlight, if I could, Mr. Chair, just to finish up my points, the data associated with the different kinds of transitway systems here already in operations. The first, of course, 2004, we opened up the Hiawatha Line, or the Blue Line. We just celebrated the fact that over that 10-year period, a little over 10 years, we now have carried over 100 million people on that line, and at a total construction cost of $700 million and an annual operating cost of $32 million. And the fare recovery, as I mentioned before, is a little bit north of 38%, and the subsidy per passenger at $1.56. The Metro Green Line, the Central Corridor, opened up just this last year and actually already has a higher daily average customers than the Blue Line did. We have over 6.5 million rides that we provided in the first 6 months of 2014, or last 6 months technically, first 6 months of operations. It's not only productive in terms of the service itself, but it also is that both during construction, but also after construction, there's a relationship between the transit infrastructure and the number of jobs that it connects, as well as it contributes and distributes. Over 5,500 construction jobs were created in the project of Central Corridor. It does have an annual operating cost of $35.3 million per year, and 2015 will be the first full year of operations. We're off to a great start, we believe, with the Green Line. We had projected the first year ridership, daily ridership at 27.5 million, with the long-term ridership of nearly 41 million. Already in 2014, the first 6 months of operation, we're averaging 34,548. Did I say 27 million? I meant, let me back up here. I'm talking a little too fast. Our first year forecast for daily ridership was 27,500. Our long-term daily ridership is forecasted to be nearly 41,000. Right now, we are already at 34,548, so I apologize for that miscommunication. Now, on to North Star Commuter Rail. North Star Commuter Rail is a 40-mile service connecting with commuter rail, passenger rail service, connecting Big Lake, Minnesota to downtown Minneapolis. Last year, we served 721,000 rides. The total construction project, including what was originally built, as well as the two stations that were what we called infill development afterwards, the Ramsey Station and the Fridley Station, made the total construction cost about $348 million. The annual operating cost is $17.6 million. The fare recovery is 21.1%. It's actually jumped up the last couple of years as we've seen some increase in ridership, and the subsidy per passenger is $13.73. And finally, Mr. Chair, I just want to say the other existing type of transitway service that we have right now, of course, is the Metro Red Line. It's currently operated by Minnesota Valley Transit Authority. They can give you a little bit more of the operating statistics, but I wanted to just say that in the last year and a half of operation is that ridership continues to grow, and that ultimately it really is part of the growing family of types of services that we are trying to build here in the region. And with that, Mr. Chair, is the end of my points, and if there are any specific questions directed to me, otherwise I'll turn it over to Ms. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. We do have a couple questions. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, Mr. Lamb, I wondered the subject of park and rides. I would appreciate some information because I realize there's more of the facilities being built, and where do we stand in terms of total ridership from those facilities, and where are we going with that?
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, Representative Rumbuck, we will definitely get that information to you. We do have a longer-term plan, capital improvement plan, which includes continued expansion of park and ride facilities. Over the course of the last 12 or 14 years, however, we have added over 10,000 additional spots to our system, and the regional express ridership continues to grow.
Mr. Chair, just a quick follow-up.
Representative Runbeck.
And I don't know if you can provide, but it would seem like that would be probably the lowest cost per trip in terms of a subsidy.
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, Representative Rumbeck, actually, it is not the lowest subsidy because of the nature of that service. When you think about that, it's primarily one way, and that once you leave a park and ride, that service ultimately you don't gain any more revenue than what you had when you left, even if you have a full bus. We'll get into more detail about that, but the more you can, I'll say, turn over your ridership, I think is, in the optimum sense, the lowest subsidy types of service.
Thank you.
Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question about North Star. Has there been any work done if that were expanded to St. Cloud, where there is a significantly greater ridership pool, how substantially it might change any of the fare box recovery subsidy per passenger, et cetera?
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, Representative Hausman, they are starting to take a look again at the phase 2, if you will, of North Star extension from Big Lake out to St. Cloud. Though I don't have updated numbers for you per se, but I think it's generally agreed within the region. Our first focus was to make sure that we maximize the cost effectiveness and of the existing operation. That's what we're focused on right now.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. We do have several questions, so maybe a little more succinct on the answers, possibly, if we can just get to the answers. Representative Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. I appreciate your comments about your valued employees. I'm a rider, and I agree you've got valued employees. I'm impressed with the courtesy and the efficiency of your drivers. I feel safe, and I think they do a really good job working with the public. It seems to me, though, I've ridden bus systems all over the world, and it feels a little slow. And I was wondering, it seems there's two areas where it feels slow. One is as the riders enter the bus, there's multiple ways to pay. It's a slow getting on the bus, and as opposed to the light rail where it's obviously very fast getting on, with a different approach. The second being that waiting to adhere to the schedule. And so my question is, are you looking at ways to speed up just the local buses, the buses that I would ride in either St. Paul or Minneapolis?
Mr. Chair, Representative, let me answer that this way. First of all, we agree, and so that's one of the reasons why this system of arterial bus rapid transit, which are local streets, but really allow people to pay their fare off the vehicle so that they can board much like a light rail vehicle and then ultimately keep that bus moving. Our analysis shows an improvement in travel time of between 36 and 40% by moving more towards this arterial bus rapid transit. Having said that, we think that signal timing and signal prioritization is the next big leap forward in terms of keeping the average speed and improving the overall average speed. Some of our local buses right now average about 10 miles an hour, and we think that we can do considerably better than that by looking at ways that we can connect with those signals and keep those greens longer.
Thank you. Representative Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my question is kind of a question that I always ask, and I guess it's been a couple years since I've been a daily rider. But my frustrations back then, and I would like to hear what we've done to correct the problem of integration between the three silos. To me, you've got the bus system, you've got the light rail, and you got North Star. And they all go to the same places, and you can get from one to another. The question I have is, what have you done to integrate that? So if that bus or that light rail is going to be a little bit late to catch that last North Star train, what have you done to integrate that to maybe hold that last train so the guy's not either calling for a ride to get back home or getting a hotel?
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, Representative Howe, you've really put the nail on the challenge associated with it. It's one thing during the middle of the day when you have multiple, there will always be a next bus, but as you connect with the last train, the last bus, or whatever it is important that, first of all, that we run on time, and second of all, we have a way of communicating with our customers and with our operators. And to that end, there is good news. We are continuing to improve through social media ways that we can connect both with our customers about things that they should maybe be aware of on detours or some other kind of a situation, but also with our operators. And so while we haven't perfected anything, it is absolutely something that we are aware of and that we're trying to continue to try to refine the reliability of our system. To the earlier point, though, part of it is to take as many variables of what keeps us from operating on time out of it. And so that we are trying to work with our local partners to gain those transit-related improvements on the street so that we can meet the schedule that we set out for our customers.
Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One short follow-up. My frustration there is that we all got good communications on each one of these modes of transportation. To me, it seems that it should be fairly simple, and you've got one central outfit that kind of manages and overlooks the whole thing. It'd be, to me, if I've got 5 passengers on the light rail or on the bus that needs to catch that train, to just pick up that radio or send a text message to say, hey, I've got half dozen people that need to catch that. Can you wait 30 seconds? I'll be there. Instead of ending up on the platform and watching it go out the rain. And that's the last comment. I just would hope that you make strides towards that central processing now, that central control area, managing that piece to make that a little bit smoother transition.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, just so that you're aware, we have about 12 minutes. We have 5 more members with questions. We do have the Transit Improvement Board and Suburban Transit to get through, so I just want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we will try and get through everyone here. Representative Whalen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll try and be brief. It's actually kind of a follow-up to Representative Howe's point on running on time, and specifically, I'm wondering about the North Star. It runs through my district, and as I was out door knocking, I actually had a couple folks tell me they stopped taking it because of its failure to run on time, and so I'm kind of just wondering what you're doing to work with local folks, specifically with the North Star, to make sure it runs on time. And in addition to that, then, is there going to be outreach efforts to say, hey, we're running on time now, try us again, to try and get ridership up?
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, I'll try to be succinct in saying that I'd love to talk with you offline on this. We do believe that we're back on schedule. A lot of it was related to construction work and winter weather conditions last year. This January, we ran 98% on time. And so we have a service guarantee that's the first of its kind in the country that says we're running on time or you do not pay. And to that end, we attracted 70 returning customers back in January. We ended up paying, we had 3 trips that were delayed. We ended up paying a total of $700, but we believe we gained more than 10 times that amount back from returning customers in revenue.
Thank you.
Representative Earhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know about the commuter railroad, but you often see people running to catch a bus, so maybe if you just slowed down to let people on and off without stopping, it would improve your... the question is, park and ride, are you keeping up with the demand for park and ride space, or is that filling up as fast as you build it, or?
Mr. Lamb.
Mr. Chair, Representative, we believe we are keeping up with it. It's obviously, as you meet a demand in one corridor, then another corridor, but we have a long range look at where we believe the park and ride demand is. That model's been really very reliable, and so our construction cycle of having a couple new ones open up every year, I think, has really done a pretty good job of keeping up with demand.
Thank you.
Representative Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Lamb, just an observation, not being somebody from the metro, blue line, green line, red line, purple line, you know, it'd be nice, there's probably a map somewhere. But my observation with that is there's so many proposals for light rail developments, you're going to run out of colors pretty quick. But I'm just curious, have you looked at increasing in the fares so that we actually have people paying for the rides they take instead of the taxpayers that don't ride these systems paying for them?
Mr. Chair, Representative, as far as the fare goes, the answer is yes. It has been since 2008, since we've had a regional across the board fare increase, but both in terms of simplifying the fares, which is an objective, but also ultimately keeping I think a regionally acceptable level of fare of the revenue coming from the fare box is an objective that the Metropolitan Council has. And so typically what we've tried to do is to say when the fare revenue for the big bus Metro Transit operation drops below 28.5%, that's when we ultimately look at increasing fares.
Thank you.
Mr. Mr. Chair, could I follow?
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Lamb, 28%, so there's some magic percentage there. I mean, what, it would seem to me you'd want to capture as great of a percentage of the overall cost of the ride by the people taking it as possible. You mentioned regional acceptability or something. I didn't really understand what that meant, but have we looked at things fiscally to make that decision or not?
Mr. Lamb.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Representative, yes, we have. And of course, every time any business raises its price, it's likely to have some reduction in demand. And that's the models that we continue to run to make sure that we're trying to optimize that balance of retaining and growing ridership versus on a volume-based thing versus increasing fares in and of itself, which will ultimately reduce the level of productive service that we have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And Representative Hornstein, I'm going to give you the last question for now.
I'm going to pass. We need to move on.
Okay, thank you. With that, Mr. Lamb, if you're going to stick around, we do have a few more questions, but I'd certainly like Ms. McCarthy to come and finish out the slides first.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Arlene McCarthy. I'm Director of Transportation Services at the Met Council. So I will be transitioning into the contracted transit services. The Red Line is a contracted service. As Mr. Lamb mentioned, we contract with MVTA for that service. And to some of your earlier questions, BRT, for example, is an off-board fare collection. So the fare system on the Red Line is the same as the fare system on the LRT lines in North Star. So that was the first time we implemented that on bus. And then we will follow with the arterial BRT corridors. So in my department, we have both transportation planning, which I'll get to after discussing transit operations. You can see here that we do provide contracted regular route. That's essentially the same type of service that Metro Transit has, but we go out for competitive procurement. We typically award 5-year contracts. And right now we have about 16, altogether with all of our services, about 16 contracts. I think most of you are very familiar with Metro Mobility. That's the service that is mandated by both the federal Americans with Disabilities Act law, and there's also some state mandates for that service. And then we have Transit Link General Public Dial-A-Ride, which I'll speak to, and a Metro van pool that the council also subsidizes. And another role of the council is we do pass through funding, both state, federal, and regional funding, to the Suburban Transit Providers, and I'm sure they'll tell you more about that. I did really want to give you some information on our Metro Mobility service today, because it is an area of great interest and, quite frankly, great concern as we look forward with our budget. This is service for those who cannot ride regular route because of a disability. The idea is that if you and I could go out and take a trip on regular route service, a person with disability should be able to take that same trip. So we provide this service door through door, meaning we escort them from a door through a door, for any service where you could take all-day type regular route bus service. This is our highest subsidy service. In 2012, the subsidy was over $26. As Mr. Lamb mentioned, we have a peak and off-peak fare system in this region. Metro Mobility peak fare is $4, off-peak fare is $3 for a trip. Oh yes, the Met Council has a certification process where each rider has to be certified that they're able to ride the service. Also, on the map that you see here, the more central green area is the federally required service area. And as you can see, that is smaller than the larger blue area. And the blue service area is what is mandated at the state level that we provide service. So we're a bit unusual compared to many regions across the United States in that we provide service in a larger geographic area than is required by the ADA law. Ridership has really been growing. As you can see from this chart, our ridership has been staggering in Metro Mobility. I don't think that would surprise you when you think about our demographic and our continually aging population here and across the country. When you look at just 9 years ago, ridership has grown by 57%. That compares more to like 20% on the rest of the transit system. So this is by far the largest growth area here in our region. We provided just over 2 million rides last year. So this chart, what we're trying to convey here is the growth in ridership compared to the growth of our operating budget for Metro Mobility. And you can see for the most part, they have gone hand in hand, growing at the same rate. What this tells us is that we have been working very hard with some capital improvements on technology, restructuring our service, looking at any way we can continue to make our service more efficient. So we have essentially saved inflation. If you look at this graph, we have provided the ridership and actual costs have been the same. So we have beaten inflation, so to speak. I'm not sure how long we can sustain that, but that is what we were trying. The blip you see there in the middle of the chart is when fuel prices were so high, and that just demonstrates fuel is a large share of our budget, so it is a very volatile part of our budget. We've been fortunate lately with lower fuel rates. And the other thing is, while I just talked about the operating budget, when we have this ridership growth, we need many more buses. So there's a significant impact on our capital budget also for Metro Mobility. TransitLink Dial-A-Ride is a relatively new service. We implemented that back in 2010. In the more rural parts of the region, before we implemented it, there really was not a public transit option. So this is for any use. There's no restriction like Metro Mobility. And we do coordinate with our regular route and other services in Metro Mobility. So if somebody wants to come from maybe the outer edges of the 7-county metro into downtown, we will bring them on Dial-A-Ride into a major transit center park ride. They transfer and then take regular route service in for the rest of the trip. So that's been very successful. We have a structured fare system for that service because it also is relatively high subsidy at about $18. It's distance-based. The vast majority of trips are under 10 miles, and that has a $2.25 fare. Up to, if your trip is more than 20 miles, you pay $6.75. So we have a structured fare there. There was a question about our park and ride system. We do have a very robust park ride system here in our region. Over the last couple decades, we have really focused on what we call regional facilities. That's, as you would imagine, focused on highway corridors where many people would be coming down a major road. So one park and ride, we view them as regional facilities. One park and ride is intended usually to serve multiple cities, people coming from multiple destinations. We do have a few that are over capacity. Some examples are in Afton at Highway 61, the Apple Valley Transit Station, Guardian Angels out in Oakdale. Maple Grove is at 93%, and out in Woodbury. So those are locations that are top priority for providing more capacity in our park ride system. This map, every couple years we go out and survey license plates to see where people are coming who use our park and rides. Provides very good planning information. And as you can see here, about 14 to 15% of our park ride users do come from outside the 7-county metro. So we are meeting the needs of not only the 7-county metro, but beyond. That has been a very typical trend.
And Mr. Chair, we are going to stop the presentation here. Where we move on from is the transit funding. I know Mr. Burris and Mr. Lee covered a lot of that earlier this year, and then we'll come back and include the transportation planning portion on Wednesday when we present the budget, so we can get
Thank you, Mr. Shetman. Members, if you would, please keep this in your save file. We will come back to that because we will be having the Met Council back on Wednesday, so we will be able to talk about that along with the governor's budget. So we appreciate that. Maybe we'll save the questions also, members. I apologize, but we are running tight on time, so we'll have those questions then on Wednesday as well. Thank you very much. All right. Thank you, Mr. Shetman, Mr. McCarthy. Appreciate that.
Yep. Happy to do it.
Now members will be hearing from the County's Transit Improvement Board, Mr. McLaughlin. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Please state your name.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Peter McLaughlin. I am the chair of the county's Transit Improvement Board. I'm also a member of the Hennepin County Board. And I'm pleased to be here today. I'm a former member of the House and a former member of this committee as well. I do have to say one thing. I have to, Representative Earhart's suggestion about hopping a bus running while it's still going. I got a new knee on the 22nd of December. I think I'm going to have to speak out personally in opposition to that proposal, but we'll see. Maybe I'll be better in a month. But for the moment, I think it would be pretty tough going for me to make that leap. Mr. Chairman and members, I'm joined today by 6 of my colleagues. Matt Look and Scott Schulte from Anoka County. Give us a wave, guys. Thank you very much. Nancy Schuweiler from Dakota County. Jim McDonough from Ramsey County. Lisa Wyke and Carla Bingham from Washington County. And you heard earlier from Adam Dunnick, who is also a member of the County's Transit Improvement Board. My goal today is to give you a quick summary, a quick overview of how we've operated since we were created in 2008. You should have received an annual report that the legislation requires. You should have that in your offices. If you don't have it, please feel free to contact us. But we distributed it, I believe, to all members of the legislature as was required. And if there are, after the presentation today, if there are people who have questions, my phone number is on the last slide. I'd be happy to come in with myself, with colleagues from the other counties, with staff to answer any questions that you might have. I'd be happy to do that. Let me move through the presentation, Mr. Chairman. First, we are a product of the 2008 transportation legislation that was passed. That legislation authorized a county sales tax for transit expansion of 1/4%, and then there's a $20 motor vehicle excise tax that went with that. But essentially, a 1/4% sales tax. That authority was given to 7 counties in the metropolitan area. 5 of the counties afforded themselves of that option: Anoka, Dakota, Hennepin, Ramsey, and Washington. And they imposed that tax, as well as doing some other things that were required by the legislation. So this was a grant of authority to counties to impose the tax. The legislature didn't impose the tax. The county boards, the 5 county boards, imposed the tax. There are some requirements in the law. One is that the Joint Powers Board had to be comprised of elected officials, county commissioners from the member counties, as well as the chair of the Metropolitan Council. There had to be a committee that included city and county elected officials that would provide advice to CTIB on how the funds would be used, and that's been set up. It's called the Gears Committee. The legislation was very specific. It was to expand transit ways. It wasn't to provide garden variety bus service. It was to expand the transit system in the metropolitan area by investing in major transit investments. And there's specific language, and you see the citation there, that this was to supplement, not to supplant, existing state investment in transit. This was to help the growth of the transit system as a part of the growth of our whole transportation system. We have been very clear, and the legislature was clear. They wanted the money used for construction, not studies. People talked, I remember the hearings about the shelves that were full of studies that were never implemented. They wanted something on the ground and built. And I think we've done a good job of that. And they wanted minimal administrative expenses. And specifically, they put in place a limitation of 0.75% of the tax proceeds could be used for our administrative costs, and we've lived within that limit. In addition to that, there was an expectation that there would be property tax relief. Prior to this, Hennepin and Anoka County were providing for 50% of the operating costs of the North Star line. we were providing 50% of the operating costs of the Hiawatha line, and the policy decision was made that this sales tax should be used to pay for half of the costs of the net operating costs of those lines, and it would be borne by all 5 counties, taxpayers in all 5 of those counties. We also reduced the reliance on state bonding. The North Star project had 33% of the total capital costs of that project were state funds, 1/3. And we dropped it down to 10% by virtue of this tax was imposed by counties on taxpayers within the 5 county areas, so that it reduced the state's investment in these major transitway projects. And that's provided major reductions in state investment that's been necessary. So here's how we work. Again, local elected officials from these 5 counties, they represent over 90% of the population of the 7-county metro area and over 95% of the sales tax in the metropolitan area. So there are 2 counties that didn't join, but they are the smallest, and they had the fewest projects that were actually in the queue. These were the 5 counties that really had projects that were in the nation. This is the membership list for 2015. Each year, the county boards designate their 2 members and their alternates. The chair of the Met Council is a member as well. I would note that Carver and Scott have non-voting members, ex officio members, who actually sit at the table of our board. That was at the invitation of the CTIB board. When they opted not to join, not to impose the tax, we thought it would still be in the interest of the region to have those 2 counties represented at our table. And in fact, this year we expanded Scott County's invitation so that they could bring a second member, a former Representative Mike Beard, former chair of this committee, to serve as an ex officio member as well. We think that's a good dialogue to have, because the traffic doesn't always care about what the county boundary lines are. So we wanted to have them in as part of the system. I put this in because I wanted you to think about what it's like to try to negotiate a joint powers agreement among 5 counties that are very different. This is what the population of the 13 colonies was in 1780. So, and we realized we ended up with a very complicated system of federal government, a bicameral legislature, the Senate and the House and all that. Well, that's a little too complicated for a little board that's capitalizing the transit system. But if you look at these sales and population figures for the metropolitan area, you can see that there are huge differences. The 6% from Washington County is actually 5.5%, and the Hennepin County number is 55%. So there's a 10 times as much revenue generated by one county than the other, and the populations have wide variations as well. So we, in putting together our joint powers agreement, we tried to come up with a way to protect the small county. If you just went one person, one vote, Washington County and Hennepin County could have run the table if you did it that way. So we had to try to find some way to protect the small counties, but also to protect the larger counties, so that a group that represented less than a majority of the region couldn't be expending funds that were generated. So here's what we did, and this has been a pretty resilient system. We came up with the idea of having 100 total votes. We gave 5 votes to the Metropolitan Council, and then we divided the votes up among the counties based on half on population and half on the sales tax that they produce. So that's where you get these numbers of 18, 7, 10, 13, and 47 for the individual counties. But beyond that, we said that you had to have 63 votes out of the 100 to pass anything. That was a way to protect, again, the small counties and the large counties from being manipulated by a small minority within this group. So if you're going to pass the minutes, you've got to have 63 votes. And you've got to have 75 votes, and again, the 63 votes, and you have to have the votes of at least 3 counties. So you've got to have a majority of the counties voting for anything in order to get something done. And if you're going to make a long-term funding commitment, or you're going to approve the issuance of debt, you actually have to have 75 votes out of this 100, and you've got to, again, have the votes of at least 3 of the counties. That's worked very well. It's a way of balance, keeping a balance among our members because the membership is so diverse. We run a lean organization. The statute, again, provides that we could use 0.75% of the sales tax for administrative purposes. So 99.25% of our funds have gone for grants. We don't own any buildings. We don't own any property. We don't own any land. We don't have any employees. We use county legal, financial, and communication staff. We contract for services as needed. We do this in cooperation with the Metropolitan Council, and any investments that we make have to be consistent with the Metropolitan Council's transportation policy plan. So we've tried to be lean and mean as a source of capital for expansion of the transit system, and I think we've done a good job of that. So what do? We invest in engineering, construction, and operations of these transit ways, these major transit investments, bus rapid transit, commuter rail or light rail. And we do not invest in studies. We don't invest in passenger rail. If you hear about the train to Chicago, we don't invest in that. If you're talking about regular garden variety bus service, we don't invest in that because we only have a limited pot of money available, and we have not invested in the arterial BRT that Mr. Lamb talked about, again, because we have not had sufficient funds to do that. The one exception, and that's what the asterisk is about on the studies, was for Washington County. Washington County really didn't have a project teed up, ready to go. And so they were reluctant to join. And so they asked for special provisions to allow, one, that about 55% of the money that's generated in Washington County would be guaranteed to go to Washington County. And two, that they could spend it on studies or on subsidizing some bus service as a way to help them get a project teed up and ready to go. And as you'll see later in my presentation, they now have the Gateway project teed up and ready to go. It actually worked like a charm. That's special provision, but that's what it took to get Washington County in, and there's been broad support for doing that for Washington County. CTIB is the largest non-federal investor in these projects. Generally speaking, you've got the federal government putting in 50% of the cost of these LRT lines or these BRT lines that we're talking about. 30% comes from CTIB, 10% comes from the county regional railroad authorities through which these lines run, and then 10% comes from the state or the Metropolitan Council. So, and on the operating side, CTIB provides half of the net operating costs of these big lines out of local taxes that county commissioners impose in the 5-county metropolitan area, and the state or Met Council provides the other half. In addition to that, the counties themselves invest heavily. We've got the county rail authorities in for, on the capital side, for a share equal to what the state or the Met Council contributes. We also, the money that the counties put in, and the money that all the non-federal partners put in, that all has to be done without, you have to wait for the federal reimbursement. So that money is at risk. So the feds don't pay up front. The feds pay after you've actually made the investment, so that we, the counties, are putting a considerable amount of money at risk to get these projects in line. But the goal here, and the product of doing that, is you get the federal 50% share. So the federal government pays for half of the cost of these projects. So here's again the 50% federal share. The upper pie chart shows what the North Star looked like with the state at 33%, and the county rail authorities at 17%, and we changed that around by virtue of the sales tax. That's a good thing. It moved it off the property tax, and it moved it out of the state bonding, reduced it out of the state bonding as well. So we think this is a good policy direction in which to go. For the federal money, this is nationally competitive federal money that's administered by the Federal Transit Administration, which is a part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. Projects are rated on their merit, their transit merit, and they're also rated on their local financial commitment. So the financial plan that's adopted at the local level is absolutely essential in our efforts to compete with the projects that are coming out of Denver, San Francisco, Portland, Phoenix, Dallas, all over the country. And so, and the prize is this up to 50% federal funding. But having the sales tax in place and having the commitment of this sales tax and having the commitment of the county rail authorities, that's what allows us to compete and to compete successfully for these federal funds. So the role of CTIB has been 30% or more of the total capital cost, 60% of the funding for project development and engineering. This is before the full funding grant agreement, which is the contractual commitment from the federal government that they're going to pay. So we're at risk for double our 30% share. And again, the 50% operating. And the cash flow while we wait for the federal reimbursement, we work that with Met Council. But these funds are absolutely essential to allowing that to happen. Now, the role of these commitments, when Met Transit sends an application or sends their annual update to the Federal Transit Administration, if they have a commitment, a formal commitment from CTIB that we're going to pay 30% of the cost of Central Corridor, the Green Line, for example, we had that, we passed that resolution, and that raised our federal rating so that we were more competitive in bringing federal money into this region. It's used, that's what the Federal Transit Administration looks at these plans all the time to see just how secure the local plans are. And I will tell you, Peter Rogoff, the former administrator of the Federal Transit Administration, he told me, he's told Jim McDonough and others many, many times that when we got the sales tax, the 1/4% sales tax, that's when we went from the B group to the A group in terms of being able to compete for federal funding for these projects. So that it was absolutely critical that we do that, and these commitments that we make are relied upon by the Federal Transit Administration as a commitment. So here you can see some of the commitments that have been made. We have fully paid off our share of our 30% share of the Green Line LRT line, $284 million. That's paid off completely. We've paid off our commitment to the Red Line. On Southwest, we have made grants of $98 million so far, and there's still another $398 million to go. And we have a 20-year financial plan that has those funds available, and you can see how the other lines work as well. But there are commitments that we have made, again, to the federal government, and there's been submittals on the Southwest, on the Orange Line, that the federal government is aware of, and that they're dependent upon the sales tax. So the payoff in all this is that this is not all CTIB, but this is over the course of the last 15 years. There's been more than approximately $1.5 billion in federal funds that have come into this region to expand our transportation system, the transit component, but it expands our transportation capacity. And this is money that would have gone elsewhere around the country. And so that's what really the prize here is to bring those funds in here on smart projects that work. And I can proudly say that the performance of Hiawatha and the Green Line have both done that. It performed well. So far, CTIB, since it was created, we passed on April 1st of 2008. 5.5 weeks after the legislation passed, we actually approved our joint powers agreement that had this power sharing, and they're putting all the money into one pot. And since that time, we've invested $648 million in the expansion of the transit system. And you can see that there are projects that are scattered across the region, and we are very cognizant of that, trying to make sure that we are investing across the region. The financial resources of CTIB in 2015, we're estimating that the 1/4% sales tax in the 5 counties will generate approximately $115 million. This chart shows you the movement, but you have the monthly revenues, and you can see that the revenue has grown each and every year, and we're now projecting this $115 million for 2015. We have also been, we have the authority to issue debt, and I think we've been very prudent in that. We've only done it once. We've been pay-as-you-go as much as we possibly could. We've had strict oversight of our expenditures. We've had clean audits. We're looking at risks. We work hand in hand with the Metropolitan Council to get a regional consensus on what these investments ought to be. We did, as I said, on one occasion, issue $110 million in bonds for Central Corridor because we had to. At one point, they were generating about $1 million in expense a day on that project, and you have to wait to get reimbursed for that. And so CTIB issued $110 million in bonds. We did it with through Hennepin County. We did an evaluation, and we used Hennepin County because Hennepin County was known in the bond markets at the time. We've got a AAA all the way. Nobody knew what this county's transit improvement board was. The financial advisor said it probably saved us almost $3 million by going with a known entity, and we worked out the agreement so that there were pledged revenues to Hennepin County, so we weren't jeopardizing our AAA credit rating. We saved the project upwards of $3 million. So we think we've been meeting the expectations of the legislature and the public. We've got this first generation of projects, which you'll see are a mix of light rail, commuter rail, BRT, and again, light rail, and then a second generation of projects, which are not all light rail, I would note. We've got a couple light rail, we've got a couple BRT, and we've got a couple that haven't been determined as yet. And so we think that we're building, again, the transit component, building out a key component of that transit system, hand in hand with the Metropolitan Council, that's a part of the whole transportation system. And again, I'm a county commissioner. We own over 2,200 lane miles of roads in Hennepin County alone. We got bridges. We're rebuilding the Franklin Avenue Bridge right now, which has weight restrictions on it, and we're having used property taxes to pay for a part of that. And so we're very cognizant of what it means, why we need to have a balance of transit and roads, just from the county perspective, and we understand from the state and city perspective as well. Finally, this Washington County guaranteed grant, I talked to you a little bit about it, but this Gateway dedicated BRT line, which is now in the council's 2040 transportation policy plan, that is a direct result of the fact that we made special provisions for Washington County to make sure that they would have the resources to do the planning that some of the other counties had already done before CTIB was created. I think it's been a great partnership, and there's been work on the Red Rock corridor, including investment in the Newport station that is up and open for service as a part of the Express Plus service. So, Mr. Chairman and members, we think we are trying to build a balanced system across the region. Again, it's a part of the overall transportation system. If you think about trying to, I like to remind people about 394. When 394 was built in the late 80s, it cost almost $800 million. And if you remember the devastation to the businesses along that corridor, there was terrible devastation. My second favorite, Lincoln Dell, was out there. As a matter of fact, there are a lot of other businesses that were destroyed, closed down because of the construction. We're not building these rail lines or these bus rapid transit lines everywhere. We're committed to building these major investments in the major corridors where they are the best alternative. And that's what we're trying to do. Where they're the best alternative, because solving these problems with a highway-only approach is going to be incredibly expensive, incredibly disruptive, and so we're trying to be strategic, and we do it hand in glove with the Metropolitan Council. So, Mr. Chairman, I would be happy to answer questions if the members have them.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a couple. Representative Runbeck.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner McLaughlin, you mentioned that these plans are adopted at the local level, and I mean, I'm trying to understand the planning process and just where people weigh in and who's adopting these things. But could you talk about the planning process? I mean, the Regional Rail Authority. Well, and who who's the lead agency in deciding which line and what is, where it's going to go? Is it CTIB or is it Met Council? And, when does the regional rail authority begin to spend money on the line? And, I guess my observation is that all the years I've been around, the legislature never takes an up and down vote. And apparently that was the idea. Somebody didn't want the legislature to really take an up and down vote on many of these, this system. So to me, that's a bit problematic. But where does it all begin?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, this could take a long answer. I'll try to give a short one, and I'd be happy to come back and give a long answer for you, Representative Runbeck, or others. The initial planning, the identification of corridors, a lot of that oftentimes takes place at the county level, but also at the Met Council level. There's not a lot of difference in the map. If you look at the maps that the Met Council has and the maps that CTIB looks at, the corridors are kind of understood. Then there's a long process where there's local participation that's led by the county rail authority to examine what the lines, what form the line should take. Should it be bus? Should it be a train? And that gets examined. It's done with the Metropolitan Council. There is always the federal, if you're thinking you're going to get federal funds, you always have the federal criteria hanging over your head, and if it's not going to pass muster, for generating federal funds, that as for example a light rail, then you go to a different form, a less intensive form. And I think the Gateway Corridor is a good example of that. And that's going to be a bus rapid transit corridor. Ultimately, and this was an agreement that Peter Bell and I struck when he was chair of the Met Council at about 11:30 at night the Monday before the 2008 legislative session started, over at the Met Transit offices in Minneapolis, and the agreement was that we could make investment decisions at CTIB, but they had to be consistent with the transportation policy plan of the Metropolitan Council. So it's complicated. There's not clear lines here, but this was a product of compromise over time. And the idea was to generate sufficient capital, and the counties were ready to do that, but it needed to be plugged into a metropolitan-wide system. That's the transportation policy plan, and that's the way we've been. And there's a longer answer, and I'm happy to go into detail in the future. That's the basic issue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Members, just so we know, we will be going over, it appears, a little bit. We apologize for, they're great questions, so we want to make sure we get to everybody, but we also have the Suburban Transit Providers here. We want to hear from them as well. So Representative Nash.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Commissioner, quick question. Could you tell us what the CTIB cash on hand is for fiscal year 2015?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry, I couldn't see the name.
Nash.
Sorry. I'm sorry. I beg your pardon. It's a little bit over $200 million. I would refer you back to the chart, however, about the funds that are committed to payments for, this is on page 23, I believe it is, for commitments for the Southwest, for the Botno, for the Orange Line. There are commitments. Those funds are committed over time. And again, our hope is not to issue bonds until late 2016 or 2017 if all these projects work.
Mr. Chair, I'll have a follow-up question later.
All right. Representative Hornstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering, Commissioner McLaughlin, in your pie chart about the colonies, who the British were in that, but I have some ideas. But one thing that comes up, Mr. Chair, very often here is this sense of regional disparities between the East and West Metro. That comes up a lot. And so I'm very pleased about the guaranteed grants plan that you did in Washington County. And I guess I'm wondering if you have other East Metro projects that are, in the works, and when those will come online. And I think, we have a number of members from that area on the committee, and again, this is just a recurring theme, and I applaud CTIB for the, progress you've made on this, but are there some other projects in addition to Gateway, and when can we start seeing some, when is the timeline for Gateway? So it's a two-part question, Gateway and then other East Metro projects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Hornstein. We at CTIB are very cognizant of the regional balance. We had to create a joint powers agreement where everybody was going to take the sales tax that their vote was going to create in their individual county and throw it into one pot. And so we were very cognizant of the need to have regional balance right from the get-go. I didn't bring the chart today, but the first major project that CTIB did was the Green Line. And that's divided essentially 70-30, 70% of the benefit to the east side. Ramsey County is how we've been counting that, and 30% to our side. And so in the short run, the east side, because of that line, the first big line that we funded has done well. In addition, though, we've got Gateway in the works, and we fought hard to make sure that Gateway was a priority, and we worked with the Met Council to get it into the TPP, and we're going to try to get it into project development here in this year, in this calendar year. In addition to that, there are now studies going on on the Riverview corridor that was resurrected, and Commissioner McDonough deserves a lot of credit working with the City Council in St. Paul. That's a corridor that had been looked at for a long time, and it kind of collapsed. You were actually chair of one of those groups, I think, Representative Hornstein. You remember that? Yeah. But Commissioner McDonough has helped to resurrect that, and the City Council actually has asked that corridor be studied. The Robert Street corridor is under study right now. The Rush Line corridor is under study right now. And I'm forgetting one more. And Red Rock is being examined as well. So we have multiple corridors on the east side that are being studied, and we continue as projects come forward. They come in lumps, okay? So you can't be even the whole way. But I'm very confident in the commitment of the whole of CTIB in bringing these projects forward, and I'm pleased with the planning work that's now going on a number of these corridors.
Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Mason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I just want to compliment Commissioner McLaughlin on his commitment to public transit and his enthusiasm. And when we opened the Red Line in Apple Valley, he came to that dedication on the Red Line. So, I mean, he really is there for this. And then I might mention that there is a public open house today at the Cedar Grove Transit Station if you want to see how people can participate in getting their opinions across. It's from 3 to 5 in Egan.
Thank you. Representative Jaskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Commissioner. Can you tell us, Commissioner, have you or has the CTIB been approached by the Zip Rail people for CTIB's participation in that project?
Commissioner.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Jaskowski, they have not approached us to ask for funding. That would, I would consider that to be in the category of passenger rail, like the line to Chicago, and that is not something that historically we have had on our list of projects that we would fund.
Thank you. Representative Petersburg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we've heard in the past, your board really is all about expansion and basically new growth and new construction of transit ways. And one of the things that we learned from back in the 60s and 70s when the transportation system through roads and bridges were expanding, that there comes to be a time in which there's ongoing expenses and maintenance, as well as ongoing other operational costs. As a county commissioner that is also aware that as we expand the number of miles available, we also expand the number of ridership. Along with it comes the additional subsidy per rider. And are you concerned at all as a county commissioner about how those additional funds needed to maintain that program are going to take away from revenues available to your county as well?
Commissioner McLaughlin.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, Brian Lamb and I have had that conversation on a number of occasions. But we have a 20-year time projection for, and we are confident with the revenue projections that we have that we can cover our 50% operating subsidy, annual operating subsidy. That's not replacing the cars or replacing things when they finally wear out. So that is an issue. That's a fair point to be raised, and it's something we should be cognizant of. That's not something that the current revenue streams, I would say, adequately covers, and I think that's something we need to look at during this legislature.
Just a brief follow-up, because I thank you for that, and I think that's an important discussion, and we heard that the actual subsidy is actually closer to 66% rather than 50%, so there's still a little bit of a gap there for us dealing with, so appreciate that.
If I might, the 50% is our share.
Correct.
There's of the net operating, the Met Transit provides the other half of that. That was where the 50%, but you're correct that I think it was, what, 38% fare box recovery, I think, on the LRT.
Thank you.
Representative Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, welcome, and I hope you're back to your 4-4 speed here in no time.
Thank you.
Rather than frame it as a question, what my request would be is if we can break down what Representative Hornstein pointed to, is the amount of revenue coming in from each county and the amount of money that's either been spent or is planned to be spent in each county.
I'd be happy to come by.
That'd be great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. Will it be, Representative Hausen, final question?
Just a quick follow-up, if I could, to Representative Petersburg's question, but if I understand it, everything I've been reading says the bigger the system expands, the more opportunities, the more riders. And that was my question about North Star before. If you went up to St. Cloud and suddenly you had a major regional center as a potential for ridership, the more riders you attract, ultimately the lower of the subsidy per passenger, because the expenses of the system are spread. So it seemed to me that maybe that was part of what you were getting at with your question.
Okay, thank you. We do have to move on. And thank you, Commissioner McLaughlin, for being here with committee.
Thank you, Mr.
And we'll ask Commissioner Schulte to come up. And while that's happening, Suburban Transit Providers, please set up your PowerPoint as well. Thank you very much. Thank you. Commissioner, please state your name for the committee and continue.
Mr. Chair, members, I'm Scott Schulte, Anoka County Commissioner. I also serve on CTIB and alternate on TAB and Gears. I'm here just to speak essentially to transportation versus transit, or how they work together. From Anoka County and many of the suburban counties' perspectives, transit is necessary. That's why we serve on CTIB. That's why we work there. Incidentally, CTIB treats all 5 counties, all 7 counties very fairly, particularly the 5 member counties. We're satisfied with the work of CTIB. We also we are beneficiaries at this point of a North Star Safety Improvement Program through CTIB, where some safety improvements to rail crossings on county roads and other city roads up through Anoka County are being taken care of by CTIB, partially by CTIB, 30% funded. All that just to say that we do support transit. However, we feel there's a fundamental problem in the Metropolitan Council's transportation policy plan. From a suburban county perspective, we're driving all new financial contributions to the urban core inside that 694, 494 loop. We see racially concentrated areas of poverty used regularly throughout the document. For years, we've been trying to spread that poverty and that racial component throughout our suburban areas. We're trying to intermix them into our communities. And this one initiative is going to drive them all back into tall buildings on the inner ring. And it's going to focus our transportation dollars there. We think there's a case to be made for regional equity to make sure that the north suburbs, the south suburbs get some of that funding and that it doesn't just get funneled into the core. That's our main focus. My main focus for being here today is just to raise that issue and to make sure members of this committee and Chairman that you understand these suburban counties are engaged in this conversation. We know there's a need for the Met Council in their planning work. We want to work with them. But we do feel that the TPP, the Transportation Policy Plan, is fundamentally flawed from that respect. I guess with that, I don't want to take too much of your time. You're very busy. With that, I'll just answer some questions if you have any.
Thank you, Commissioner. Representative Uglum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Schulte, and this is not just Anoka County's perspective on this. There are other counties that feel the same way.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Schulte.
Representative Uhlum. Yes, there are 5 counties that are working together. It's Scott County, Carver County, Anoka County, Dakota County, and Washington County. We just work together as a group to make sure that suburban counties aren't left out of the picture when it comes to funding, whether it's regional solicitation dollars or state bonding money, whatever it is. We want to be a cohesive group at the table. I'm here testifying today on behalf of Anoka County as the transportation chair, but we are also meeting as a 5-county consortium as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on with the Suburban Transit Providers. Welcome to the committee, gentlemen. Please state your name for the committee and
thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Washy. I chair the Suburban Transit Association, and I'm also on the Plymouth City Council. With me today, we have Jerry McDonald, who is our vice chair. He is also on the Chanhassen City Council. And then, of course, you know James Clark from Esterly and Kramer, who we work with. Today, we just want to do a very brief discussion of what Suburban Transit Association is. It's primarily, it's made up of the 4 operating entities you see in front of you, Minnesota Valley Transit, Southwest Transit, Maple Grove, and Plymouth MetroLink. Those operations service, primarily what they're concerned is the garden, if I could use Commissioner McLaughlin's viewpoint, garden variety bus service. So we just focus primarily on express service, getting people to places and getting people to their jobs during rush hour in the morning and rush hour in the afternoon. We also have other services like Plymouth and Maple Grove provide dial-a-ride services within their communities, but pretty much we just stay focused on the bus system. Just to give you the context geographically of what Suburban Transit cities, there are 12 cities in those locations that you can see. I won't go through each of them, but what I think what is important is all the other communities that utilize these services as well. So out of Maple Grove have park and rides. So you have people from up in the Rogers or even north of Rogers that will come down 94, park in the park and ride and utilize those services. I know in Plymouth, we have people that come from Delano, they park at our park and ride, and then they take a Plymouth MetroLink bus into downtown. And so the same with all the other services that we have here as well. It's not just these communities that we're focusing on, it's all the surrounding communities that utilize those rides and those to get to their jobs either in St. Paul or Minneapolis. This next slide is meant just to give you an indication of what our ridership has been. I think we're talking about 12 years ago when Suburban Transit was building out of its infancy and getting into more of its operations. We had about 1 million riders. In 12 years now, it's 6 million riders. And so this shows some of that trajectory as we've gone since at least here 2009 to what we're projecting is a little under about 5.5 million rides in 2015. And Councilmember McDonald will go through some more information in terms of how we connect people with places, how we connect people to jobs, and the increase in that ridership for those.
Thank you very much. What this slide will show you is that within the suburban transit area, what we're looking at is a growth in population between the years of 2010 and 2040 of almost 36%, whereas within the 7-county metro area, we're looking at a growth in population of about 28, 29%. So the majority of the growth is actually taking place in the suburbs. What this means is that we need to be able to get people from one place to another within the suburbs. There's a number of services we offer as part of Suburban Transit, one of which is we get people to the Mall of America, we get people downtown, we offer a service to the State Fair. In fact, last year I know Southwest Transit set a one-day record of 13,000 rides, which is quite a few rides, but it was, again, it's a cooperative effort because the State Fair, to accommodate being able to do this, revised the way that they do transit and actually created more of a transit facility, so that does help us get people in and out. We also give rides to the University of Minnesota, not only for students, but also for the football games. What this has allowed us to do is, again, as you all are aware, parking is very tight down at the University of Minnesota. We have basically taken people off the road. The few parking spots that are available, the buses help provide people access to these venues. We also take people down to the Target Field for baseball games and other special events. This also helps to relieve the parking congestion in downtown Minneapolis. We've also looked at a number of other things as far as helping people get to regional shopping areas. The next slide, what we're looking at here is, again, connecting people to places. And what this is the majority of the jobs over the next few years to 2040, we're looking at an increase of over 50% to the suburbs. One of the things that we have looked at is how do we get people to those jobs. That brings us to what's known as a reverse commute. We're actually bringing people from the cities, the core cities, back out to the suburbs. What this does, it allows businesses to relocate to the suburbs where there is more room for expansion, and it also allows us to be able to get their workers from home to work. Examples of this are in the Plymouth area. Recently, Twin City Federal has decided to open up a facility out in Plymouth. What this is going to mean is that there's 1,600 new jobs being created there. A lot of their workers are in downtown Minneapolis, North Minneapolis, the other suburbs. We're now setting up a reverse commute program to be able to get those workers out to Plymouth and to the jobs. Polaris is also another company that is looking at going out to Plymouth. That will also create a number of jobs. And again, what we're looking at is the reverse commute there. In Eden Prairie, the area that I'm from, Optum is in the process of relocating their headquarters. They are also building new facilities, new office parks. They're looking at 6,000 plus jobs. So all of those people right now would need to get out to the suburbs. What we currently provide is express service from the suburbs to downtown. But what's beginning to happen is that you're seeing some of that reversing to where the jobs are no longer downtown. They're coming out to the suburbs just because they have room to expand. What I would like to do at this point is turn it over to James, and what he'll do is talk to you a little bit about our funding and also what we're looking at. James?
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Mr. Chair. James Clark with Messeling and Kramer, representing the Suburban Transit Association. Mr. Chair, before I start in with our legislative agenda, and I will be very brief, I just want to make sure that it's clear that we support all modes of transportation, and we work seamlessly with Metro Transit. And it's really a great partnership that we have, and we value that partnership with Metro Transit. And then one other thing, in previous years there have been 6 providers of the Suburban Transit Association. Now there are 4. Some might think that that would be a bad thing, but it's actually a very, very positive development. In this past year, Shakopee Transit and Prior Lake Laker Lines has combined with Minnesota Valley Transit, and that will result in a stronger, more efficient service to all those communities. So with that, Mr. Chair, just very briefly, as I said, we do support all modes of transportation, but we provide bus service. That's what this association does. And so In previous legislation, there has been a provision for 4% increase in bus service. We would obviously strongly support that. But most importantly, Mr. Chair and members, as you move through the process and come up with your funding bill, what we are asking for merely is a mention, merely a few words that says, including the suburban transit providers. So whatever funding mechanism you come up with, whatever amount that is, we just ask that we be included in statute, that we be a part of that additional funding. And then the next slide, thank you, Jeff. The next slide, we're very excited about the opportunity to provide a demonstration project or pilot project for suburb-to-suburb service. We've talked about suburb-to-suburb service for a number of years. We think that we can provide service from Burnsville or Eagan to Eden Prairie or to Plymouth or to Maple Grove. And so we're going to ask for additional funding to look at suburb-to-suburb service. As was mentioned earlier, that's where a lot of the jobs are right now. It's where a lot of the population growth is projected in the near future. So there is currently some suburb-to-suburb service, but it's primarily within the jurisdiction of the individual providers. So we'd like to see some more opportunity for suburb service. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, there's a slide called governance. We are asking for an elected official from one of the suburban transit provider communities to be appointed to the TAB. And currently there are 33 members of TAB. As was mentioned earlier, we provide nearly 6 million rides to the metropolitan area, and we would just like to have a voice on TAB. So with that, Mr. Chair, that was very abbreviated, but I understand your time constraints, and thank the committee for your time, and thank everyone for staying for time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, gentlemen. We do have one question. Representative Bernardi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark, I just wanted to ask a question. How does your expansion of service or asking for more funds for suburban to suburb differ from the needs in other suburban areas in the metropolitan area? And because there's suburb to suburb needs through the whole metropolitan area, and you're asking for your service to be able to address those suburban to suburban needs, how do you see that different from the rest of the metro area?
Mr. Chair and Representative Bernardi, I would hope that it would demonstrate the need for suburb-to-suburb service, not only in the areas that the suburban providers provide service, but as you're absolutely right, throughout the entire region. I think it would be very complimentary, and I hope it would be something that folks in other parts of the region could point to and say, look, this is the demand out there. They've just demonstrated the demand, and I hope it would be complimentary.
All right. Any other questions from members? Representative Hausman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to follow up on that, you know that Senator Scalzi and others have wished that they too could be part of the Suburban Transit Association. You notice on the map this rather large rectangle north of St. Paul and then east of St. Paul, and I think that suburban group of cities would wish they could also be part of the Suburban Transit Association.
Mr. Chair and Representative Hausman, we do too. And actually, when I think at the time when Representative Scalzi had that bill, we testified in support of that. We would like to see even more suburban providers, if that fits with what the region would like to see. But we testified in support of that bill.
Thank you. Any other questions from members? Gentlemen, thank you for being with the committee. Thank you for your patience and hanging in there with us, along with members of the audience and members. Our meeting on Wednesday will be with the Met Council again, reviewing the governor's budget there. And so we look forward to seeing you there. Yeah, Met Council. Thank you, and this meeting is adjourned.